Hello, folks. Welcome back to Management 5804, Leadership in Technology-Based Organizations. I'm Dr. David Townsend, and this will be lecture 9.1. And in this lecture, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about whole product solutions and value networks. And so we want to spend a few minutes connecting some of the ideas that we've talked about in regards to disruptive innovations with some of the key ideas from Crossing the Chasm. And so in a sense here, we're going to build a bridge between the frameworks to identify critical strategies that firms can use to try to go mainstream. And so as we've talked about, the technology adoption lifecycle reflects the pattern through which new innovations spread across different markets. And so in general, the technology adoption lifecycle, again, is structured around a classic bell curve and even reflects some of the underlying conditions for how to segment across the various standard deviations of a bell curve. But there's something more central to the framework than just this sort of pattern distribution here. And that's the underlying assumptions that it makes about consumer behavior. And in critical points of discussion that we've had so far, we've talked about key differences between customers in the early markets, the innovator and early adopter customers with these mainstream markets. And so, again, we've highlighted the critical challenges that firms face when moving across the chasm, moving from the enthusiasm of customers in early markets to the pragmatism of customers in mainstream markets. And we so far have identified a key set of strategies for how to actually pick our entry market, how to identify the critical first market that we go after when trying to cross the chasm. And so we use the analogy here of the bowling alley as a framework to understand that attacking the mainstream market oftentimes is about picking the right entry market, dealing with the pragmatism that customers have, and then using that in kind of a bowling pin style to knock down and identify and then knock down other segments within that mainstream market. And so it's important, again, as we've highlighted, when you cross the chasm, to target a particular niche that has a specific set of needs and wants that customers have. And so the challenge that we have now is we've got to figure out how to scale from that initial entry decision into mainstream markets to how to really enter into a wide variety of different market niches that are comprised within the mainstream. And so again, now that we've successfully, hopefully, crossed the chasm, we need to develop some strategy here to think about how to build on that momentum to spread across the mainstream market. And so within that, again, the challenges that we've highlighted with the chasm is that, early adopters and the early markets overall are buying change agents, or they're buying products based on the enthusiasm they have for technology. And in both cases, there's an active search for a technological or technology-based solution. And again, the early majority we know is focused much more on buying productivity improvements, as we've highlighted. And so they want a technology to improve but not revolutionize the underlying business. And given that, the early adopters and early majority are not great reference points for each other. In fact, they kind of turn each other off. And so the conflict oftentimes is what creates enormous problems for companies that are diffusing, creating new products. So we've talked about some of the ways to identify and target the early majority customer. We've highlighted the challenge, or the sort of rhetoric around the bowling alley as a way to reach into the sort of a pragmatic early portion of that mainstream market. And so again, we're trying to build this sort of cycle of diffusing this innovation. And so now, we're continuing to sort of think about how do we move forward? How do we identify a critical next set of markets and continue to improve our standing? And so within that, we've talked about the niche approach. We've talked about identifying a target customer, right? A single identifiable economic buyer, the beachhead customer that we can use to get traction. And we've got to give them a compelling reason to buy, right? And we've talked about in quite a bit of detail about the economic consequences that would attract a mainstream customer to purchase. And so if we're doing that successfully, again, they're drawing the product across the chasm into the mainstream. And the reading this week really talks about some of these compelling reasons to buy and what that might look like fundamentally within a particular target market niche. And so, again, the critical issue is we've got to overwhelm that customer with value. And so within that, there's different strategic options that we're going to face. And so we've talked about this leverage the point of disruption, right? So what's unique about what we're offering? But then the critical part of attaching that to a particular market segment is identifying, and the reading kind of colorfully calls the fish to pond ratio, right? So it's got to be a market that's big enough to matter, but yet small enough that we can lead, and it's a good fit with our broader strategic aims. And so critically, right, here's the connection for us, is we're trying to build value around the core features of our product and plus identify a value network. And so now we want to lay some precision around this particular notion because as we talked about with disruptive innovation, the value network itself is what specifically drives the success of a disruptive innovation and going mainstream, right? And so it's not just the features of the technology or the features of the product itself, but it's the system that's built around it. And so as we kind of move through these different stages, that's going to force some changes within our business model or the way that we organize ourselves. And so we'll spend, in the next unit, we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about how to structure business models and how to move up to an ecosystem level. And we'll certainly spend quite a bit of detail diving into it as our third structural pattern. But our second point here is, again, the crucial focus now is designing a system that complements what our product does exceptionally well versus what it's trying to disrupt or what it's trying to replace. And so this critical issue of moving from a solution that's going to pull us across the chasm to now refining our product model is the crucial step that we have to take in order to move into the core of our mainstream market. And so the solution model here is the infographic highlights is this design, sell, and build notion of identifying our beachhead market and creating a product that is maybe 10 times better, as the reading highlights, in order to attract new customers. But then as we go mainstream now, we kind of shift more into a traditional product strategy of designing products, building, and then selling. And again, so it's a kind of more of almost a linear strategic process that most firms would typically do. But that's not just now giving up on agile and sort of ignoring some of the lessons to date. But what it is it's starting to build in an iterative fashion what we call this whole product solution. And so the whole product solution, is the reading highlights, takes the generic product. So it takes the core of that product that we've built. And again, at the core of this should be the specific set of features that we've identified that are fundamental to creating value for our customers. And so in a mainstream market, again, these are features of a product that are crucially important to attract a pragmatic set of customers who, again, want their products to improve their lives, but not necessarily dramatically change things. And so that generic product, again, that baseline product, now is going to be augmented with a series of additional features, but more importantly, a value network around that overwhelms that customer with value. And so building on that generic product, that expected product, again, is what the customer thinks they're getting, oftentimes based on the sales pitch. And so if we think about a pragmatic customer, again, they want you to work through identifying critical features and critical experiences that they want to obtain through developing or consuming, through consuming the product. And so that expected product adds a layer of value, a layer of utility around just the specific features and functions that are built into the product. But that whole product solution now, to connect some of these ideas together, is what the customer actually needs to get their job done. Whether they're aware of it or not, the product itself is designed to critically resolve that job to be done framework that we've highlighted. And so within that, again, the whole product solution is a series of escalating steps where we start to add an additional set of features and buying experiences and value and construct this network to take what's importantly different about our product and service, and then again, to be able to deliver that full value to the end customer. And so that ideal product, again, is the sort of frontier part of product design. And it's that fully customized product that meets customer-specific requirements and needs, right? So in the ideal world, what is everything this person needs to get the job to be done? But importantly, this third step here, right? This whole product solution attaches back to the logic that we've discussed on the jobs to be done framework. And so the product itself and the corresponding value network allow consumers to, allow your mainstream customers to accomplish the critical things that it set out to do by hiring your product or service to do a job. And so within that, right, developing a value network becomes crucial because as the reading highlights, markets are much more than just buyers and sellers, right? I love the way it's described here as this ecology of interrelated interest, right? So it becomes an ecosystem. It's not just a specific product now, but it's an ecosystem of self-reinforcing factors that, again, collectively drive the value up. And so this value chain logic that we typically talk now about in corporate strategy circles is what we're building. We're building an entire end-to-end consumption experience for the mainstream customer that solves the problem, solves the job to be done that they have. And to do that effectively, we've got to be able to foster key partnerships because not every bit of this needs to be done specifically by our firm. And so we don't have to try to go this alone and try to accomplish everything. And we can certainly think about companies like Apple with the Apple iPhone, right? They build out the entire app ecosystem, and instead of having to design all these apps by themselves, they allow other independent developers to try their hand at developing unique customer utilities to augment and improve the way that the iPhone itself functions. And so, that's again an example of a key partnership. Or other facets of Apple working with Corning to deliver new types of glass that they can use for touchscreens. Apple doesn't necessarily have to develop that all internally. And so the question now as we go mainstream is how do we design these broader ecosystems to have a bunch of these interlocking elements constructed in a way that we sort of move closer and closer to that ideal product. So that whole product creation, again, this sort of see the wheel over here, it's all the different facets of activities and resources and inputs and processes that we need to move from what's at the core of our generic product, right? The core features or functions that product can do in order to construct this entire value chain. And through that, this is often done through alliances or connections that we have with other partner firms to be able to construct this value network. And if we do it effectively, the reading highlights, it becomes this self-reinforcing, almost a virtuous cycle where all these elements together continue to magnify the value of the other elements and they drive the success of that product forward. So this is exactly what we're starting to see with Tesla right now. Again, why it's such a critical stage in the life cycle of this company because they've got the Model 3 and it's Model 3 starting to get traction. Apparently it's outsold Mercedes in the first quarter of the year. But within that now, all the other elements that Tesla is trying to add to the specific value network that they're building, the charging stations and partnerships with other companies, that's what's, again, going to be crucial to see if Tesla is really able to go mainstream. And again, as we've talked about, the verdict is still out, and there's a lot of pressure on the financial model of the firm to pull this off. But critically, the company is positioned to effectively make this happen. And so within that, this proper execution of a whole product solution, right, is going to amplify the probability of being successful in mainstream markets. But it involves taking that generic product and adding layers on it to make sure that we deliver not just the expected value that our customers have, but we actually solve the critical job to be done that they develop. And so the value network then becomes all the different interlocking features that we need to build this ecosystem or this ecology of interrelated interest. And so again, we'll talk much more about this in business model design in our next unit. But the crucial thing here is, again, the pattern that we had in the past, even to cross the chasm, isn't necessarily the pattern that we used as we go forward, because now we need to be able to not just deliver what's important or central at the core of the product, but deliver a value network that takes our disruptive innovation, again, from something that's technologically unique and important to now actually solves that broader job to be done that mainstream customers have.